Hi, this is Zoe, and this is my thematic unit on trees. Here's my newsletter, if you can see it. Next week, the theme is trees, and I have information about my field trip coming up, activities that we're going to do this week, songs and books that we will be using. Sorry, it's hard to see. And the week's vocabulary. So I got this really awesome template off of Teachers Pay Teachers. My header is next week's theme. It's all about trees. The first week of October, it starts off saying, trees are a very important part of our world. They create habitats for animals, are used in many products we make, and are a beautiful part of nature. Then it gives information about the field trip to an apple farm. I thought an apple farm would be a good way to have children go and explore trees as part of nature and see the different types of things that they can produce, like apples. And then I gave some suggestions for books and songs that can be used at home that we'll also be using in the class, like The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, Mr. R's Parts of the Tree song, and the tune of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. So it's a cool song that goes to the beat of like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, except it talks about like roots and branches and the leaves, and it helps children understand the parts of the trees by correlating them to the parts of the bodies, like in the head, shoulder, knees, and toes song. And If I Were a Tree is another song. It talks about the parts of the tree again. And then we're also going to be using the 5 Little Apples finger play in class. And all of these songs have a link to them. This newsletter would be available online and sent by email as well, so the parents would be able to click on the link and be able to view that easily. Some of the activities that I picked for the week include making our own Play-Doh with apple, coconut, and pine tree scents, which are all related to trees. A lot of people don't think of maybe apple or coconuts when they think of trees, but they're all products that come from trees. And I think that's something important that kids should know, is the food that they eat, some of it is grown on trees. And we're also going to be making fall tree sensory bottles, leaf rubbing books. So it's something you can do with leaves, as you put it underneath the paper and take a crayon and rub over the paper with the leaf underneath, and it will create a print of the leaves. And all the kids can have their own little leaf journal. We're going to be doing a hanging fall leaves activity in the center, where the kids can take fake leaves that have Velcro on them and hang it up on the wall as a gross motor activity, and a leaf cutting fine motor activity where we could either use paper leaves or real leaves. The children can have practice with scissors and work on their fine motor skills. We'll also have a create a touchable tree science display in our classroom. So we'll have parts of the tree laid out as a display, like branches and acorns and leaves and all sorts of things that we can find out in nature during our nature walk on the apple farm field trip. These are also things that you could just get from your backyard and really find anywhere that you could bring into your classroom at no cost. We'll also have a T is for Tree, Letter of the Week, Leaf Pile Scavenger Hunt. So with that activity, it would basically be like a sensory bin full of leaves and different cutouts of letters, and the goal would to be find as many letter T's as you can, because that would be the letter we would be focusing on for the week. I also have planned an activity of how many leaves tall are you? It would be a measurement and counting activity. The child would stand against the wall, and we would do it as a small group. We would have cutout of leaves that are the same size and measure how many leaves tall are they. So it would be an introduction into measurement. Instead of using inches or a ruler, we would be seeing how many leaves tall they are. We'd also, in our block center for the week, and maybe keep it a little longer than just the week, because I think this is something the kids would really like, is tree cookie blocks instead of our normal wooden blocks. Tree cookies are the little round part of the tree that can be cut off at the bottom of Christmas trees and smoothed out, and they can be used to stack and build instead of traditional square cube wooden blocks. Something else we'll do is apple printing with the apples we collect from the field trip. And again, if your class isn't able to go on a field trip or don't have that planned, you can always buy some apples at the grocery store, bring them from home. A lot of these activities you can substitute for and take materials that you would already have lying around at home or in your backyard. And again, we'll be doing a tree investigation. During the nature walk, we'll be seeing how the tree feels, what we smell, what the trees look like, and be talking about the trees as we're discovering them and walking through the apple orchard. For my explanation of my newsletter, something that I used as a resource to write my explanation was the NACCE program standards. NACCE program standard 1 describes teacher involvement with students should be warm and welcoming and encourage students' work and accomplishments. And I plan to achieve this goal by approaching all 8 variations of theory of intelligences with a variety of different activities and coursework. By touching all 8 areas of intelligence, children are given the opportunity to learn and achieve in a way that suits each individual student best. So if a student isn't strong in one area of learning, then they have the opportunity to still learn in our class by going and discovering and learning through other opportunities that are given. Also be following NACCE Program Standard 2 of curriculum that states curriculum should promote learning in social, emotional, physical, language, and cognitive development. With the lessons and activities I've planned for the week, there are opportunities for growth in all areas. Like I described before, students who need extra help or support in different areas will be covering all topic areas with our activities. To achieve NACCE's 3rd program standard of teaching, I've created all lesson plans with flexibility and extra support, so that really just goes on. Again, for my main point is that we will be covering everything through these lessons, from cognitive, physical, social, emotional, all areas of development. And lastly, I'll be embracing NACCE's 7th and 8th program standard of family and community involvement. This will be done with our class field trip, visiting a local apple orchard, and going into the community and getting outside of our school and reaching out and discovering things within our community. And also, our family is invited on the field trip. This will be a great opportunity for family involvement. With my webbing for the thematic unit, my theme goals are there are different types of trees. The trees change throughout the year. There are many different parts of a tree. Different trees can grow different fruits, nuts, or flowers, and all parts of a tree have a function. So I think these are really basic ideas that could get the children's interest. when talking about the different types of trees, we can talk about the trees that we see around our community, and then different trees like pine trees that have green all year round, and trees that change colors. The leaves change colors and fall down in the fall. And there's different parts of a tree, so we'll be learning about that. And all the different things that come from tree, like the food we eat, and that all the parts of the tree have a purpose and serve the tree in some way. Some of the theme vocabulary we'll be using is dioecious, which describes a tree that has leaves that change colors. Evergreen, which are trees that stay green all year long. Roots, trunk, branches, leaves, and bark. When describing Howard Gardner's 8 intelligences and finding learning opportunities with all of those for the linguistic intelligence, a few ideas I had were to create a poem on a cutout of a tree that describes the tree, make a giving tree retelling kit. So basically I would have the characters and setting of the giving tree on, what's it called? A board. Felt board, on a felt board, with felt board pieces that can be put on, and the children can manipulate them and retell the story with them. For logical mathematical, I found a fall tree counting puzzle. It was really cool. It's a picture of a tree that has 10 different pieces, and at the bottom of each piece it's labeled with a number, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And to put the puzzle together, all the numbers have to line up in order. So you can either put it together by looking at the tree or put it together by putting the numbers in order. Also, for logical, students can work together and help you create scented Play-Doh. They would have to follow a recipe, which I have printed out right here. It's pretty simple, all ingredients that you could bring from home. For visual spatial, that would include the leaf rubbing book. Also, I have an idea of a foil printed fall tree art. So you would take a piece of aluminum foil and crush it up into a ball, and the students would use that to dip into the paint. And when they place it on their paper, it creates a really cool, like, crinkly, colorful effect. And it's easy to make a fall tree picture with it, and they come out looking really pretty. Another one would be learn about the 4 seasons of a tree paint activity. And that activity, the paper would be divided into 4 squares, and one would be a spring tree, a summer tree, a fall tree, and a winter tree. For musical, we would be listening to the songs I described earlier in the newsletter, and also had an idea of creating and playing your own percussion tree instrument. You can use parts of a tree to create like drums and rattles, and I have a link to follow instructions on how to make that as well. For kinesthetic, I thought of an acorn sensory bin. So it would be a sensory bin filled with acorns and different parts of the tree. You could really add whatever you wanted. Just something for the children to touch and explore. Also had a pine cone fine motor activity. The children would use tweezers or just their fingers if tweezers was too much of a challenge for them, and pick up pine cones. Interpersonal would include how many leaves tall are you activity, and you would be able to create a graph and describe how many leaves tall is each student, and compare and contrast. And also the fall leaf raking center. This was a really cool idea I found on Pinterest, to have fall leaves in the center and child-sized rakes, and it would enhance their gross motor activity as well. I think it would be really cute, and the children would have a lot of fun with it. For intrapersonal, I found a tree life cycle file folder game for only $1 to print out on Teacher Pay Teachers website. It's basically just a file folder game that shows the life cycle of a tree, and the children would put in order which would come first and the order of the life cycle. For naturalistic, we would sort Dioecious versus evergreen trees. Another one was make a self-portrait with parts of a tree. And this was something I found really cool because we talked about something similar to this at the SCACE conference, when learning from someone that spent a year being a teacher in Europe. They did a lot of nature-based learning, and they would take parts of plants and trees and create art with them. And one of the things they did was create a self-portrait using parts of nature. And that turned out really cool, and that's something I would like to do in my own classroom. Next up, I have my weekly plan for a week during this thematic unit. For Monday, I have us planned to go to the apple orchard for our field trip. So they would arrive between 7 to 8. The bus departure is going to be at 8:30. We'll arrive around 9:30. When we arrive, we'll review safety rules, stop for bathroom break, and just start off our day there. From like 10 to 11, we'll walk around the orchard, discuss the parts of the trees, collect apples. And then after that, we'll return to the picnic area and eat. We'll be leaving there around 11:45, 12. Excuse me. Then after that, we will be arriving back around 12:45, 1, have nap time. After nap, we'll have story time and whole group meeting, then small group meeting. Final center rotations, and then table toys while we wait for dismissal. So the way I have my week set up is pretty similar to that. The field trip kind of throws the schedule off. So from 7 to 8 a.m. we would have arrival and free play in the centers. From 8 to 8:30 we would have breakfast. 8:30 to 9:30 we would have outside recess. Unless weather doesn't allow, then we would have some sort of indoor activity instead. 9:30 to 9:50 we would have a whole group morning meeting. From 9:50 to 10:50 we would have our morning center rotations. 10:50 to 11:25 we would have our small group. And 11:30 to 12 we would have lunchtime. 12:15 to 2:30 we would have our nap time. 2:30 to 2:45 we would wake up, clean up our mats and blankets. 2:45 to 3 would be our class story time. Then 3 to 3:25 we would have snack time. 3:30 to 4:30 we would have an outdoor recess, unless weather doesn't allow, again, some sort of inside activity again. 4:35 to 4:40 we would have a whole group afternoon meeting. And 4:50 to 5:15 we'd have our afternoon small group session. 5:15 to 6 p.m. we would have afternoon center rotations. And then 6 to 6:30 we would be doing table toys while waiting dismissal. And this is based on a 4K Child Care Center schedule. So some of the changes to the environment I've made, I've already kind of went over and discussed a lot of these already, so I'll try to hit the points that I haven't already made. So for dramatic play, I would have an interactive apple wall picking, interactive apple picking wall for the dramatic play area. Kind of similar to the leaf hanging wall, except opposite, because you would be taking down the apples and collecting them in the bucket. Also put my fall leaf raking center on the list. For the blocks, I did a tree vocabulary spelling with blocks. Try to show you the picture. It's probably not going to come up. So the word would be spelled out with chalk, and you would use blocks to fill in the spaces and spell the word. And this would be a good activity for just an introduction of vocabulary words. Even though at 4 they might not be learning how to spell them, they would still be introduced and be around just literacy. For art, I listed the leaf rubbing book and the foil printed fall tree art. Music and movement, I listed the songs I've already talked about. For table toys and manipulatives, I put the fall tree counting puzzle I talked about earlier and the tree life cycle file folder game. Science and discovery, I have a parts of the tree science display and a nature display discovery. So it's both are a little different. For the parts of the tree science display, it's more so not accessible to the children where they can touch. It's more just like a display, like in containers. And the nature display discovery is where they can actually go and touch and manipulate the items. I think it's good to have both options because for some things it wouldn't really be safe for the children to be touching some of the objects like heavy branches or things like that. But then for the objects that we would allow them to touch and explore, I think it's great for them to have the option to do so. For sand, water, and sensory, I listed the acorn sensory bin and an apple picking sensory bin. So that was similar to the pine cone fine motor activity. The apple picking sensory bin, the children would pick up little puff balls that are like green and red and that look like apples, and would use tweezers or their fingers to pick them and put them in little cups. And for library, again, I listed the books, The Giving Tree and The Lorax. The reason that I made these changes to my environment and my learning centers is because I believe they promote all aspects of the 4 main aspects of development: social, physical, cognitive, and language. And the purpose of the addition is to promote learning and development while introducing new concepts or twists of familiar concepts. So what I did not want to do is totally change everything and not have any familiarity in the classroom. I wanted to make changes that I thought the children would like and enjoy and would be beneficial, but still keep our routine at the same time. With changes, there's always going to be challenges. So for children who need extra support, there will be accommodations available. Of course, with changes, there's always going to be safety concerns. Some of the common concerns can be limited when classroom expectation and rules are constantly reviewed and reminded. So I really think classroom management is a huge way that I would cut out safety concerns to make sure there's always positive guidance and there's always teachers in the room observing and helping students. I think that's the biggest step in keeping safety issues from happening. The changes in this classroom will allow my classroom to be fully integrated, meaning all subject areas will become interrelated, which I think is amazing because there's no point in teaching science, math, language all separately when you can combine them all together and have so much more learning at the same time. I think it's really great when you're able to cover so many bases at one time and do it in a way that children will enjoy, that enhances play and learning. So finally, for my lesson plan, I created an art project. My early learning standard is HPD-50, which is use tools that require strength and dexterity of small muscles with a moderate degree of control. And this would be done with a large group or a small group, really. You could do it either or, but this lesson plan is written as a large group activity, and the activity is called tree prints. The materials you need would be washable paint, apple slices, leaves, flowers, paper, messy t-shirts for the children to wear, a large roll of messy paper or a messy tablecloth, hand washing station, cleaning spray, and paper plates. A health and safety practice is to make sure to wash your hands when you're done because you're going to have paint on your hands and sticky stuff from the apples, all sorts of germs. And also, please don't eat the materials. I know apples are yummy and we all like to eat apples, but these are not apples for us to eat, and we'll have apples as snacks later. So in transition, I would read The Giving Tree and discuss how trees give us so many things that we can use in so many different ways. We would draw a tree on the whiteboard and label parts of the tree and discuss what parts of the tree we'll be using today. So to start off, at the tables, we would lay out either a messy tablecloth or a roll of large paper to keep paint from getting onto the table. And we would have the students put on the messy t-shirts to keep paint from getting on their clothes. And then I would lay down the supplies for them, like the paper, apples, flowers, and leaves, enough for each student to have some, and put paint at each station for the students to share, pour some out onto a paper plate. And for the process, the student will use the materials that they're given, like the apple slices or the leaves or the flowers, dip them into the paint and print them on their paper as they wish, and each student will have a unique piece of art when they're done. So as our out transition, I would give a 5-minute warning before it's time to clean up, just to give everyone a heads up. When the activity is coming to an end, I'll bring around a trash can and have the children throw away their materials that they're done with, and have students line up to wash their hands after their materials have been thrown out. When they're done with the activity, I would have them either go to the book center or another quiet time activity until we transition into our next activity while our other friends finish up. An extra support that I would use is to stick a plastic fork into the apple to make it easier to grip for any students that have trouble gripping the apple. And a challenge would to be let the students use a paintbrush to add details to their picture if that's something they wish to do. And so if the student finishes early, like I was talking about before, they could free draw or go to the book center until we move on to our next activity. So I actually have an example of the activity that I was just talking about. I don't have any flowers or leaves with me, but I cut up an apple. Maybe I can is a bad angle. Cut up an apple and some paint. So then I have some construction paper. So you can either use a half slice or like a quarter slice to make different prints. And it's hard to see, but I have blue and red on my paper, so you can do like half blue, half red, or just one color, or mix it together and make purple. And then you print that onto your paper. And then you can make different prints like this. So this wraps up my thematic unit on trees. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.